Hosting the QASIG, and thank you for coming. And those of you who have been here over the years have made this community strong, and the idea sharing. Thanks for coming again. And everybody who's new, welcome. And please join in more often. You know, get involved in the community and texting and being involved, even if you'd like to speak and things like that. So at the beginning of the year, everybody obviously thinks about what's coming up and what are we going to change and what's new and what's happening. So we thought it'd be neat to get a good panel of thought leaders from the community, and let's talk about what the future of QA is. And am I off the screen? Sorry.
Yeah, most of that.
I don't want to stand in front of everybody else. We'll do that. Andy is our moderator today, and he'll do the introductions. But thanks again for coming, and then QA afterwards, and networking and those sorts of things. So enjoy.
Okay, well, we have Brian. Go ahead and smile or raise your hand. Successfully delivered software services and solutions for over 20 years. He's an experienced leader delivering software quality and continuous improvement of products and processes. He's currently a healthcare IT consultant with Ballistic Consulting. He's been a board member of Pacific Northwest Software Quality Conference since October 2010. We have Joy. Joy enjoys managing testers and leading test projects, as well as hands-on testing, coding, and solving technical problems. She participates in community QA and Agile groups. She has an MBA in International Business from Stern Graduate School of Business at NYU. Joy is currently a software developer and test at the Climate Corporation. We have also Jamie. Jamie has over 14 years of experience in leading teams of software engineers and over 18 years of experience building world-class, high-quality productivity software. Jamie is currently Senior Manager, Engineering at Tableau Software. Prior to joining Tableau, he worked at Microsoft, where he was a member of several Office product teams, including Outlook, OneNote, Trustworthy Computing, and FrontPage. And Matt. Matt is an experienced, driven, dedicated IT leader of vision, focused on strategies that build team cooperation and create business efficiencies. With over 15 years of IT leadership and management experience, he was responsible for the successful development and implementation of Alaska Airlines' IT quality assurance and quality engineering programs. Matt is currently an IT security consultant at UW Medicine IT Security. And those are our panel members.
There you go. Thank you. Slide.
All right.
Big thanks to everyone who made this, signed up for this, for Joe and Shelley and the Quardev team for hosting this great event, for Matt, Jamie, Joy for volunteering to be part of this. Just to set the stage, we're pronounced as subject matter experts and leaders, but in reality, this forum and you guys are all part of that conversation. So let's be clear: the questions, the answer, the perspective are all valuable, and that's what makes this event so cool. So really, thank you for being part of this. So quality. It's a word we're trying to wrap our heads around. And I think we need to start doing that even more intentionally than we ever have before, because it's under fire. What is it? What do you expect out of it? What's the, you get the next slide, the word there. Make sure these are clicking. And by the way, if you guys can't see.
We can't see the slides with 4 people.
I was just going to say, we need to spread out. I was just going to do a continuous improvement check. And of course, we'll off it. Did we just completely mess up the camera?
Jamie, you gotta come back. There you go. Sorry to squeeze you.
Are we kind of mostly in there?
Yeah, you guys are in.
Okay, just wanted to check that. Thank you. I think it's something that we need to get intentional about understanding what we represent, what we're doing to improve it, and the expectations we're setting in the industry. The challenge I faced is the multi-layered, I think, where quality is going. Next slide. One of the things right off the bat from a project management, people saying delivery, you've got it. Is it good? Is it fast or is it cheap? And as long as you get 2 of those, then quality is embedded in there somewhere in the middle of that. This diagram here is from ASQ, Association for Software Quality, and it's another layer of that where they represent risk, resources, and quality to try and represent that. But even that is multi-layered depending on the context of who your client is, what the performance expectations are, what the data iterations are. It used to be you could fit that all within one package delivery, but nowadays with as a service delivery, being more either a subcomponent or directly what we're going after, this gets complicated. One of the things that I think has helped me in understanding quality is the fact that as you start justifying the value of it, it's about relationships. And I know that sounds warm and fuzzy at first, but if you look at the underlying degrees of why we have quality activities and why we're even talking about it in the first place, it's basically to build a relationship. And if we look at that in the way that we approach our business model, in the way that we approach our teams, an example is, well, what's preventing a quality emphasis, even if you don't have QC and quality people designated with those roles on the team, about going after security, for instance? Why don't you do an assessment saying, what are we missing in terms of our live service or our instrumentation leading up to delivery of that? And what can we do to add value to make sure it's being covered? Find the stakeholder for that, and all of a sudden you're part of the value propositions instead of a cost center. That's one example, and there's many versions of that. And then you can forge the relationship within your business departments and peers to help find that. Some examples here. Why do we try and do the right thing every time to build and sustain relationships? Why do we seek zero defects and conformance to requirements to build and sustain relationships? What about the ability to satisfy stated and implied needs? What about DevOps, continuous improvement? And any of those, you're talking about a targeted, we're going to help the next team in our business model and ultimately our clients and our customers have sustained business relationship. So when you start thinking about it in terms of what am I doing as a quality focus, I think it's an interesting way to look at how to solve the problem of defining what quality is. Remember, quality plus context always equals what you're going after. It's never just the word quality in and of itself. If you just stick on that, others, it's a discussion, but I think it becomes a losing battle without some context associated with why you're going after justifying an effort. I did a talk in October at the Pacific Northwest Software Quality Conference, and we came up with this slide. When I polled the audience, what are you seeing as challenges going forward in 2017 and beyond to quality? Achieving quality, justifying quality. And so these are what they came up with: architecture and complexity. As you start doing hybrid model and, software as a service, IaaS, PaaS, on top of embedded, in-house systems. Fast feedback, they want it faster. Well, yeah, you think, continuous improvement, continuous delivery, continuous deployment is an aspect of that, but the expectations around that and achieving this sustained level of whatever people perceive quality to be becomes a challenge. The tools to provide that feedback, doing more with less. How many times have we heard that? You guys cover all that, but you're not getting as many tools, as much budget, or as much resources. Automation in and of itself, deciding what is sustainable to automate and keep going. Time to market, the whole list. You guys can read that. This is what they came up with. And all of those are very valid. I added a couple more to the list, and this is the two that I think deserve a conversation along with that. The first is client-customer expectations. I think to understand that is changing and to understand how it's changing, that as we understand it's more about multi-client and the fact that they can configure, pay for performance, pay for service. And we're often putting in customers' hands, if you talk to a lot of sales professionals and watch what they do on the selling proposition, they ask them, well, what do you want it to do? Here's the capability. Now let's frame this into and add to particular services and components, and we'll make that do what you need to do. And you're doing that in one-off iterations at a faster rate than ever before. I think that's a factor we need to consider as we represent what a quality turnaround looks like. What does that mean, and how can we scale that to multiple versions of that? It used to be, oh yeah, we just got test data management, and as long as we account for that, we've got that covered. Even that's got a layer of complexity now based on how businesses are selling configurable client customer expectations. So I think that's one avenue that I think is becoming a challenge more and more for different businesses. The second is value versus cost center. I think it's the onus of a lot of quality programs, or even the element of quality within delivery, to ask, what are we doing to make sure we're not labeled as a cost center? And I know it just sounds like, okay, it's a statement, it's simple to say, very hard to do. What value are we placing on the quality? What metrics are we using? What instrumentation are we doing to make sure that it's perceived on the budget sheet as something that's adding value to our client customer delivery versus being seen as a risk and insurance that's a cost center that will be an endangered species more and more years as people, tighten things up. So I think that's a couple of things that I think are making the challenge. With not a lot of time and just basically on my quick soapbox here, the biggest communication problem is that we don't listen to understand, we listen to reply. And this kind of comes back to that relationship part of quality. I think we need to start, my final pitch on quality is, I think we need to have a strategy to be successful. Have a strategy of how we're approaching this. If the context of quality is what if firms are criticized as what should be done about it. And just saying we need to have better quality without understanding that context and having a strategy to go after that is really what's going to solidify us being successful in that. If we just try and maintain what's already there, just saying, well, duh, quality is a word, of course it's part of our delivery, it's part of our, why wouldn't we have it? I think we need to force ourselves to have a strategy of what we're going to be doing about it to make it more successful in the future. Okay, that's my 2 cents.
All right.
Oh, you skipped one. Yeah, don't want to get to the future before we. Yeah. So it's always a little bit dicey to give predictions for the future. If I recall, Bill Gates came out wrote the book The Road Ahead in the early '90s and completely missed the whole internet thing. So putting my thoughts on the line, I'll say 2017 was pretty easy for me. I looked at what the trends have been over the last couple of years and what I thought seemed to be still going strong. And that is more focused on security, especially with the recent DOS attacks on the internet, and a lot of companies have experienced issues around those. I think security is going to be big for some time to come. Most companies are not nearly as secure as they need to be. So that's a pretty safe bet. Another one is performance. A lot of companies have discovered recently that there's major issues with their software when they get a whole bunch of people looking at it at the same time on the web. Mobile apps, that is a trend that I think is going to just continue. Last I heard, there were more jobs open for iOS developers in the city of Seattle than there were actual working iOS developers in the city of Seattle. So that's a pretty safe bet as well. I think we'll continue to see a shift toward automation. I think most companies that are actual software development companies as their core business are already mostly hiring testers that are automators. Companies that don't have software as a core, I think, tend to have more of a mix of automators and traditional manual testers. I also think there seems to be, just in my own personal observation, there seems to be more and more agreement among industry professionals that manual testing is not going to go entirely away. If your software is intended for humans, you probably should have a human look at it before it goes out the door. As far as methodologies go, Most of the companies I've worked with over the last 10 years have been using some flavor of Agile. Usually, only a few of them have used a true Agile, but they're bringing in bits and pieces. I think that's probably going to continue. I haven't seen any really new methodologies that look like earth-shattering. If you've heard of one, I'd love to hear about it, because I'm always got my ears open for something to help us do our jobs more efficiently, better, faster. I think we'll continue to see more blending of roles between dev and test. The company I work for now, most of the back-end developers are writing their own unit test for all the back-end stuff. And unit testing tends to fall into the dev camp. But a lot of testers are technical enough to actually fix code, and some of them often are fixing code. When they find a bug, they just fix the bug. So I think we'll continue to see those two roles merge. Geographically and culturally distributed teams has been a trend that's been around for quite some time. I think it'll continue. Many people are now working remote. The tools have gotten a lot better. It's just easy to share things across the world. So I think we'll continue seeing that as well. And its trends will go strong through 2017. Now beyond 2017, that's when I got to put my sci-fi hat on, and that was a little bit fun. I think we're going to see a lot more things built with software, so there's going to be a big demand for developers and testers. It's already going into various devices, appliances, cars, homes, sporting equipment. I've heard you can now get a golf club that will judge your swing, has software in it to judge your swing. I could see that going into tennis rackets and skis, and really let your imagination run wild. They'll be, as long as the technology is cheap enough, they'll be putting computers in everything. More robotics. That's a personal favorite of mine. I've been waiting for robotics to get really big for a long time. I was the first person on the block to buy a Roomba. And I'm disappointed that we're not farther along in that area than we are. But I'm hoping to get in some work in robotics before the end of my career. So.
Is this for pot wars to make money on the side?
And then advanced tooling. Wouldn't it be so cool to have software that finds and reports its own bugs? Or AI machine learning, then the tester's role would become training the machine and monitoring it. So there's mine.
Nice. Cool.
All right, so the tact I kind of took here was thinking forward and thinking about having been in the industry, 20 years, kind of what's exciting to me, what's coming, what am I looking forward to? And I've got a lot of slides, so I'm gonna keep Andy busy here. So when I started, I think the very first interview question I got when I joined QA was test a toaster. And at the time that was seen as like a good question to see, like if you just had that tester mentality, you could pick apart something that was not software related at all. And then I saw this yesterday. I don't know if you guys saw this. This is a smart toaster, which was announced at CES, which sort of blows my mind. And so you put your toast in there, and then you can, on your phone for some reason, pick out pretty cool stuff. So 2017, one thing I'm excited about is I can bring my interview question back and ask people to test a toaster. But just kind of echoing what Joy said, software everywhere is coming, and that question is actually really fun to start thinking about. It's like, how do you test a toaster that's connected to the internet, has sensors, and you have profiles and all kinds of different stuff on there. I highlighted a couple of other bugs that I thought were interested here over the last couple of years. So the Apple Watch, when it shipped, had a bug where if you have a tattoo sleeve, the heart rate monitor didn't work. And I remember when I heard about that, it made me wonder, did the tester have that in their test matrix? And how do you cover that if you don't have somebody with a tattoo sleeve in your office? So these kinds of things, though, testing not just the software but the hardware and the sensors, and I think that's a really interesting direction things are headed. And the kinds of bugs that we're going to see, start to move beyond just like, hey, my software app on my PC crashed to, like my Nest thermometer battery died because of a perf bug, and now my house is freezing. So that's one interesting trend. Another, Troy also talked a little bit about artificial intelligence, machine learning. Like this is coming. Natural language processing you can throw in there as well. We had some fun bugs here over the last year. Taybot, I don't know if you guys saw that. That was the bot that Microsoft made that was supposed to be able to interact with you, and people basically tricked it into becoming a racist bot. So they found it kind of just to work.
That's the sign.
Yeah. So they pulled it and they put it back out and they exploited it again. And so they've just shuttered the thing completely. We had Alexa trying to direct little kids to porn accidentally with the natural language processing, and then we had our first Google car crash that was the car's fault this year as well. So this stuff's pretty interesting, and when you think about testing it, like it starts to move. Like testing has always been, I input X and I get Y as a result. Well, now I input X and I get Y, but you input X, you get something different, and that's by design. Or I input X today and I get one result, and tomorrow I input it and I get something else. Like, how do you build automation of things in that world? So I think that's pretty cool. And then how can we leverage tools like that within our testing world? I think it's pretty cool. And also, how do we protect the safeguards? So like that Alexa bot or the Taybot shouldn't have went sideways. How do we as testers make sure that the safeguards on the AI are there, so we're like the guardians to protect us against Skynet. So that's a pretty high responsibility. Augmented reality, virtual reality is another thing I think is, it's coming. We've seen a lot of stuff there in games this year. Pokemon, people walking around running into things because they're looking at their phone. But this is another pretty interesting test problem. You've got a new form factor. How do you think about testing something where it's taking your environment into the processing, and you could be anywhere in the world, and what are the test cases for that look like? And it's all video, which is not something we've been very good at testing, and very frame rate dependent. This one on the right here is a roller coaster game that they call nausea-inducing because the frame rates were off by just a little bit. So not fun. So that's an exciting area. Security, Joy stole my good ones here. But no, security is huge. This is just going to keep getting bigger and bigger. Every year it seems like we get a new exploit that is the biggest breach ever. It seems like that's just par for the course now. And nations hacking each other is pretty interesting. I think some of the fun here is how do we, there's security testers, and that if I could go into an industry coming out of school right now, security testing, I think would be fascinating. But for those of us who aren't security testers, how do we stay up enough on these areas to add, effectively cover this for the features and products that we're testing? And it's moving so fast. How do we keep up? Cloud adoption. This one's a little less exciting. I think everybody's like, oh yeah, cloud. But we're still pretty early in the move to cloud. We've been talking about it for a while, but adoption still kind of at those early stages. And there's been a bunch of innovation here around continuous deployment, A/B testing, and all microservices and these kinds of things. I bet a lot of people in the room are already using that stuff. Some of you maybe not yet. Probably all will be soon. And I think we're going to have to continue to evolve and keep up as the cloud just goes faster and faster. And then the last one I put up here, telemetry, big data, sort of along the same lines of okay, how do we measure quality? We've got the ability to look at large sets of data and make sense of it now. Are we understanding how customers are using products and automatically detecting when they run into bugs or things that aren't working the way they expect? And then being able to use that to kind of change how we're testing the product, what we're automating, where we're spending our test time, and then also being able to use stuff like that to feed back into machine learning algorithms and things, so that we're building automation that's actually real time adapting to how customers are using products. Super cool stuff. So those were some of the ideas that kind of like I said, get me excited and make me think what a fun industry and time to be in the industry.
Nice.
I think that leaves me.
It does leave you.
I don't have a slide up here. Oh, yes, I do.
We made a place.
I just jotted some notes around, because when I think about 2017 and beyond, again, I come from, a background
background of starting in development, going into quality engineering, and then moving into security. So I kind of look at things with that whole swath in front of me. And when I specifically look at, what's going to happen, it's very clear to me that the IT disciplines that today get to be siloed around their specific expertise, well, that's where the relationship piece comes in, because in those folks that are quality engineers, they're not going to have that luxury. You're going to have to know these people, because you've often heard it said that in quality you become a jack of all trades. Well, now you're going to have to become a higher level player in that. It's evident. It's a continuing trend, and some of what I'll say actually was echoed by my colleagues up here. But you have less time for testing, and you have greater delivery pressures. So that means there will be less manual testing, but I agree with Joy. Manual testing will still be there. But it won't only be functional testing. It won't only be looking at the, making sure the UI is right, making sure things behave right. There will be other tests that need to be done. And it will need to, in many cases, be done by a human being. However, if you have less time to get the work done, and you have to deliver a good quality product, and I should inject right now, I don't believe you can create a quality product that is not secure. And I'll talk more about that later, but the two go hand in hand. And when people believe they're separate disciplines, I think you run into a problem. But what I'm saying is, as somebody that I would classify, I don't know if they'll call it quality control in the future. I don't know if they'll call it quality assurance in the future. I think it's going to tie more to quality assurance will be the overarching umbrella, and quality engineers are what most folks will be. We've used the term SDEV, we've used a variety of things. You're going to be an engineer, which means you're going to have to figure it out. If you talk to engineers, they'll tell you nothing in the world was created without them. Well, to some degree, it's somebody having to sit down and figure it out. Going forward in IT, it's each one of you. So when you look at the need for more automation, who will write it? I agree. So my colleague said developers will provide something. They will write the code to do what the requirements say it needs to do. And you'll have to interpret those requirements, but they're also going to have to give you a test to prove that they understood the requirement and really delivered. And then you get to work with those requirements beyond that to see what else should be considered. Because developers, their objective is to get it done and out the door. So when you need that more automation, we can buy product. Products can be brittle, they can be challenging with various platforms. The technology pace is very rapid. There's a challenge with product. Or you can build it, but you're going to need automated help. The other thing is, if you're looking at a complete application, it's very hard for even a handful of human beings to do a very thorough job in the amount of time that you're going to give it. So some areas that I highlighted: performance. Performance is an area of quality. It's also an area of security. When you mention your DDoS or DOS attacks, it's all about taking performance to zero. On the flip side of that, you can also look at it as scalability. Regression tests will always be there. You want to make sure you didn't break what already existed unless it was intended to go away. Security and vulnerability. You at least have to find what we know about. The challenge will always be what we don't know. And hacking has become a cottage industry in many areas of the world. There's too much money in it. There are businesses, and that's what they do. So think about that. I could have gone down the element of spear phishing leading you into one place or another, but I don't think that's necessarily going to tie into what people are trying to do here. So just stay focused on the application and what its areas of exposure are. The other thing that you'll be looking at is a higher demand for accuracy. And that means that, you know, somewhere data is read in, it's processed, and it moves forward. Well, we all know, and none of us would do this, test with production data. But we need real data and real examples to test with. So you're going to have to develop the skill on how to develop those appropriate data models and create the synthetic data. You're going to have to look at the requirements and what the nature of the data is and be confident that you understand whether or not it needs to be encrypted and is encrypted. Because they'll tell you, I did write the code, so it's encrypted from here to here. Well, really? What did you use? What levels of encryption are you using? There will be other tools. You'll have to, I believe Wireshark and Fiddler and other tools that allow you to look at data packets are going to have to be in your toolbox. I think that there, you know, so to wrap up that data portion of it, you know, you either create the synthetic data or you learn how to write obfuscation routines for each of the data scenarios that you're working with. Or you learn how to capture them from somebody else, and, you know, again, through those relationships. If you can't do it yourself, you've got to have a strong enough relationship with someone who can help you. On the other side of it, we're going to need to virtualize services. We're going to work. We work in a virtual environment anyway. You know, servers are virtual, workstations are virtual. You're going to have to be able to bring up a test environment that's appropriate and drop it, and refresh it when you run tests that have changed the data that's out there. And that's the only way you're going to do that in a timely and productive fashion is with automation. So I think that, you know, I talk about development being responsible for delivering more automated tests, but I really believe that quality engineers will have to write a lot of those tests. They may be written in different languages. They may be written in, you know, they may be scripted. You may be using the tool for part of it. For all I know, folks could be downloading Kali Linux and using some of the tools in there. Because there's a really fine line between the black hat and the white hat environment. And how did the black hat hackers figure out how to compromise the code that you just put your heart and soul into? Same way the white hat folks do. They grab a tool and they scan it. They start working through it. So when you know how the other side works, you're going to be more effective. So I think the focus to make sure that you are, you know, in demand and gainfully employed in the future is, you know, in the overall QE picture, I see people needing to develop true test data and services, be able to validate the interfaces and the data transfers, and make sure that they truly are as secure as they're said to be. You need to protect the customer experience when a customer is involved. You need to build test and deployment modelings and processes, and you need to work with many to get that done so it can be successful. Of course, scripting will be part of the role, validating, and I think security, it has to be. And I'm not, of course I have a security bias here, but I'm not trying to make everybody into a security professional, but on the other side I am. You know, I am. Because it's not the game we used to play. And when you think about what makes a business, what is the most important thing to a business? If I buy the software, I install it, what makes it different from me installing it at another location? The data. What makes me a successful organization? My customers. Customers not only expect it to work, but there is an implication that if they are giving you information that your company will be a good custodian of it. How much companies invest in this has everything to do with how much they view their brand. So I just think it's really important that if you're here and you haven't, and you've been contemplating various certifications, I can't stress enough, you have to advance your technical skills. And it, unfortunately, you can't say, well, I did that last year, I'm done. It's an ongoing event.
Yeah.
And the more you have in your toolbox, the more successful and the more in demand you will be. I'm gonna stop at that.
Nice. Well done, guys. I could just take an opportunity and springboard off everything my colleagues said. I was thinking about something as they were talking. A perspective, I think many of you will hopefully share this, but I'm just going to tease you a little bit with this. I don't think it's safe to assume that IT is going to be the storehouse of technology going forward. Now, this is what I'm saying here. We've all been living with IT this and IT that, and it's become a moniker and cliche going forward. If you look at the trend of connected devices and the cloud combined and the exponential growth in the number of that's going to be, and this has already been projected, I didn't make this up, I was reading about it. OT is the next moniker that we need to be very familiar with. Operational technology. There's already businesses starting this division within IT, either reporting up to a senior CIO or they're putting the OT role under COO. Operational technology, I predict, will parallel, I don't know to what percent, but it'll be in the same conversation as IT in 5 years. So we need to understand that roadmap and what that means to how we position relationships and strategies in business. Go look it up. OT. It's coming. Now we need to be prepared and think about it as professionals in the quality space. What does that mean?
Right? What does that mean? No, I mean, so IT, when you say IT, I think information, which is, this is why we're here, right? That's all the information. So, okay, you mean something different by IT and OT, I think.
Operational technology is the framework of understanding, managing, supporting connected devices in that framework. Because it's a big enough enterprise and expertise and implications that to just shoehorn that in as an assumption to technology and the traditional IT department, IT role, you know, usually rolling up to the CIO, having multiple divisions, focusing on that.
Okay.
Businesses are making a conscientious decision to say, we're going to create a separate entity rolling up to the executive level to account for the impact of connected devices, technology, risk, development, client-driven platform, all the elements of the services.
So by IT, you're thinking of traditional definition, excuse me, the traditional definition where like there's an IT department, and that's all.
And department, but if you think about it, the reality is most things in our vocabulary and our business proposition have technology and IT joined.
IT was initially surrounded for
Yes.
data preservation.
Yes.
Now they're going to
Initially.
start focusing on operational issues, not just data.
Right. Up to this point, there hasn't really been another strong competitor to that acronym in the technological space. There's always been derivatives, and we've covered it within IT. You know, especially in larger, you know, verticals, you know, finance, et cetera. But having that now be accounted for with operational technology is a whole new spin on how we need to position what the quality and, you know, ultimately client's customer delivery roadmap looks like. Who's accountable for what, and how are these teams, like we talked about, going to pair together and understand those relationships to reduce risk and increase productivity. I just think it's something we need to think about. It's where I can't predict exactly where it's going to line, but I have a strong indicator that we're going to see OT come up in the conversation alongside IT and elements defining technology at whole at the business level. Yeah, go for it.
So Joy touched on this the most, and I'm just curious, to what extent do you think AI and machine learning can help replace testers?
I can answer that one.
Okay.
So we developed 2 years ago, we developed a dashboard that actually was just doing nothing but taking metrics out of the operational data that was occurring that day. But we also developed an algorithm to go with this dashboard to where it would look back over the year at all of those metrics and begin to alert us if anything went sideways. So that AI learning, using the data you have, comparing it to the data you had to predict failures coming up. So we built that and it was very effective. Individual incremental releases began to impact the performance that you couldn't see with the human eye with manual testing. But it was small enough that we could actually detect it and begin to alert on it and prevent failures weeks in advance.
There's a variation of that I also saw where we put in instrumentation to measure what the requirements said that the service or product was going to do, and then measured what was actually being used by the product or delivery teams. And we found areas of drill down that weren't being touched after repeated operational use because there was a wrong click on a help text or it wasn't being marketed effectively enough or et cetera. So, how the clients at large were using versus how we delivered it per the prospectus and all of the capabilities became a huge delta and very effective to be able to say, okay, we need to understand how to correct this, to make sure customers are getting the full use, or maybe we need to reassess our design because this is what we thought they were going to do and how they thought they were going to go through with it. In reality, they're not touching it.
Yeah, I'm not imagining that AI is going to replace humans in the way that robotics replaced humans in production in manufacturing. Because I think you're going to need humans to create the AI, right?
Just have better tools.
Yeah, humans to build the AI tools, and humans to monitor the AI tools, and humans to look through do the actual real analysis of the data that's coming from these tools. So it's not going to be like a brainless inserting this instead of that. They're going to be, I don't think it's going to take jobs away from people, if that was part of your question.
Maybe not in the short term.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had some success building smart monkey tools, things that just go and randomly click. I started building monkey tools that just click wherever, right? And then starting to build smarter ones that kind of understood a little bit about like hierarchy of UI, being able to handle a random dialogue popped up. But we mostly use them for like stress testing.
Right, but you said building.
Yeah,
right?
so
and what I'm talking about is learning.
Yeah.
So building is programming.
Right.
Right? AI, machine learning, is the opposite of programming almost. It's learning without programming.
Yeah.
And like, it's not robots in machinery. I'm worried more about the AI that's driving a car, which we always thought of as a human function.
So the interesting piece that is so we built that. I mean, we've done that with pretty low tech stuff. But being able to then take input from how are customers using the product and having the tool kind of adapting real time and learning about the stuff we built was pretty dumb about the dialogue popped up, dismissed, right? But to be able to interpret what is that dialogue and what does it mean? I think it's possible to build tools like that, and I don't know, I agree that somebody needs to build that. They might be developer jobs kind of in the quality world. I don't know, but I think it's coming, and I don't think it'll completely replace. But that was the kind of tool that we just ran it all the time, and it would find all kinds of bugs that we wouldn't have found otherwise, and kind of like a robot. So.
I would say that I don't think it's going to replace. Humans don't really get replaced; we get complacent. I mean, seriously. When you think about what we do now, we test yesterday, and we test the here and now. We do very little in the predictive realm. So, as these AI models will go forward, and there will be a lot of just data that comes out of them. Well, first of all, you're going to have to figure out if it's going to learn how it can interpret and make reasonable decisions. Okay, that's part of the problem when we talked about some of those other devices where they went away that the manufacturer didn't think they would ever go, because they didn't really understand the potential. And in the example that Ben Russ gave over here, where he's talking about gathering the information so we could start to look at trends and possibly predict through the smallest of activities, start to look at, well, we may not have a problem now, but this is what we'll have tomorrow. And I think that's why I said you've got to keep investing in yourself. I hate to say it, it's a math equation for many of them. But that's really what happens is you've got to really get good at data. You've got to get good at trending to the point where you can start to forecast. Because that's how you figure out what the next thing is. And that's how you figure out when you're looking at quality or security, you're starting to look at, okay, we have these, it's the minute blips that you have to pay attention to. Because everybody else is paying attention to the overall trend line. And you have to develop the skill set and build the tools or have partnerships with those that can help you put that whole thing together. Plus you have to sell it. Here's the bigger challenge. How do you stay gainfully employed with the title quality? Because quality is really subjective. It shouldn't be, but it is. You can ask anybody in this room what they think it is. You probably will come up with some similarities in here just because of your profession, but if you walk outside on the street, it can vary quite a bit. So I really do think that the beauty of being in IT today is that you get to reinvent yourself as IT is reinventing itself. As it is moving quicker and quicker, you have to remember, I've got to stay in front of this. That's what gives you the edge. That's what will keep you gainfully employed, and that will be what gets you recognized.
You have a question?
I just had a note on the AI as well, as I've done a little research recently. But with the implementation of machine learning as it is currently, the agents are very dependent on either a score methodology where the AI has some sort of evaluation where they are told this is a valuable thing and you need to continue doing that. But a manual tester, as a human, doesn't always have that exact score. This isn't something that's exactly just defined for every person. Everybody has a different idea of quality. So a human who can interact as a human user would have more insight than an artificial program that has learned to use the application. And I think that will have value into the far-reaching future, where I don't think we have artificial agents who are strong in general intelligence yet. I think we have very specific agents who are very good at learning specific tasks and accomplishing it in well-advanced performance as a manual tester would. But I think in terms of general scope of testing, humans will for quite a while retain an edge over an artificial agent.
Just real quick, I would say too, like that's a great example too, like the smart monkey. Like if I could go work on that more today, we know bugs tend to cluster, right? So building that into there would be really interesting. Of like, oh, I found a crash over here. Let me score that high, and then keep hammering out that part of the product. Right now, how do you keep that from going off the rails and finding a bunch of bugs nobody wants to fix? And there's a bunch of hard problems that aren't going to get solved right away.
Until our boss is AI, it's always going to be constrained by our ability to take in what it provides. Like that's a value return. So if we increase, our ability to understand what it can give us, that capability, then see where it goes.
Oh, sure. I have a question for Jamie, because you work for Tableau, and because you deliver a product, and I don't know what frequency you deliver, but you're delivering it to end users. This question is about the verification side of testing, especially with automation, towards shipping faster and at lower risk. Are you satisfied with current implementation, the way you do it, the way you handle it now, and where are the challenges that you see? Developing it faster, shipping faster at lower risk.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it is definitely a goal. We talk a lot about the time from an idea in somebody's mind to the product being in customers' hands with that feature implemented,
Right.
and that delta is way too long today. So we ship quarterly. I'd like to be in a world where we were able to ship daily, and it was just a business decision of how often you actually wanted to go push updates out to customers. But yeah, so it's all like we're spending a lot of time and energy trying to figure out like how to reduce that delta. It's faster in the cloud, and I think, you know, like that was one of the things I was kind of getting at with like, as we see more and more things go to the cloud, like that enables us to do a lot of things faster because you've got fast rollback and you got A/B testing, and you know, you can deploy to a small set of customers and kind of see how it goes first. We don't have that luxury with their desktop products, where we really have the mobile. Mobile's good. Although with mobile, we can at least be a little more aggressive about getting the updates taken by customers, because most of them just take updates automatically.
Okay.
Desktop, no.
Okay. I was just thinking about the verification side. It's like functional requirements.
Yeah,
Does the
well-
system do what we need?
Right, and so I guess the thing is like on the desktop side today, we have to do a lot more, you know, kind of hammering on the product manually. So that means longer ship cycles, right?
Yeah.
Because, you know, we don't have that kind of quick rollback mechanism.
So can I, we have some questions that have been put in already via the website. I'd like to have a rollback of those, unless somebody
What
has
time do we have?
something. It is 7:20.
Let's,
We're moving right along.
I'd say let's take a couple more questions from the back and
Okay.
on that side, and then we can roll into those.
No objection.
That would be my 2 cents. Live is better.
I had a quick follow-up question for Jamie. You guys are shipping quarterly. What's your lead time on for test?
Lead time. Well, so we kind of treat each quarter as like a short ship cycle. So we have about, so we do kind of 2 6-week ship cycles within, and it's kind of, you can kind of think of each as like 2 weeks of coding, 2 weeks of stabilization, 2 weeks of you know, just like getting ready for release. But really, we're developing all through that whole 12 weeks. It's just a matter of like when we're turning things on and off in the product. So, you know, mostly like when something's ready, like it's usually 6 weeks or less before it gets turned on and ready to go out to customers. So we have, but you know,
So
small features are coming fast. Bigger features sometimes are behind a flag for a long time.
So you keep things behind a feature flag even for the desktop versions?
That's right. Yeah, so we have feature flags, and then, you know, the idea is you turn the feature flag on when it's ready to go to customers, and you kind of catch that next train that's ready to go out. It's, you know, like again, like in the cloud, it's nice because your feature flag,
Right.
you can turn it on, you know, oh, you found a bad bug, you turn it right off.
Yeah. More rather than turning it off.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the things I've been thinking about, and I'm hearing it echoed by many of you as well, is that roles are changing because the technology is changing. It's becoming more embedded in different parts of our life. I think Joy talked about, you know, more towards DevOps and combined roles. It almost seems like we're on the verge of an entire schema change in the industry, not just in the terminology, whether it's IT or OT, where does it fall in the organization, but also this idea that we have of, you know, the PMs go out to the customers and get the requirements and turn them over to the developers, and they do their thing, and they give it to the testers, and they do their thing, and it goes out. That's not what we're going to continue doing much longer. And we've got a lot of people who are really entrenched in those being the roles. But if you had to predict where are we going, you know, what would a team look like in 5 years, 2 years, 6 months, I don't know how fast you're going, but, and how can we start having conversations about how do we prepare ourselves, what do we advocate for within companies to kind of put those things in place and prepare ourselves and our teams for those changes.
Anybody want to field that?
I'm going to put Matt on the spot because we were talking about that earlier.
Well, you're gonna have to bring me totally into that conversation, but
I'll start into it. I think part of it lies into let's be honest and ask, what are companies and organizations willing to spend money on? And start there.
Yeah, I mean, look, they have a bucket of money from working, and they have to generate value. It's either for the owners or the shareholders, okay? I think it's not a good idea to attach yourself to a role and say, that's what I am. Because I I think that's where people get complacent. This is what I am, this is what I do. I think you need to think more about what I can do. And I think when you look at the teams of tomorrow, I think there are some things where centralization can make sense, okay? But then there are other areas where it's going to go out to various groups and they're going to have various skill sets, and they won't all be technical. And I think what people have to do is figure out what they're really good at. What can you do that builds confidence in others? What can you do that makes others want to invite you to the table? And, you know, again, I had no idea you were going to talk about relationships, but I'm dead serious. It's because it's the collective that generates the result. There is no one person, even though if you've ever been a software developer, I know a couple of the folks in here have it, the world started and ended with what you did. But the reality is that's not true. Because, you know, you've got folks that are idea people. And they will conceive of something. And then you have other folks that will architect and engineer how that could happen. But then you have all these pieces, once you get it figured out, that have to come together. And that's a variety of different disciplines. And I can't say that, oh, I'm going to call, you know, Joe and Jane and so forth and bring these folks in. I'm going to look at who has the ability to help me with that discipline as it pertains to this equation. Because the bottom line is, when you deliver the result, will it be consumed? Will it be of value? Will it enhance the bottom line? Organizations exist to make money. They also exist in a nonprofit world to help people and so forth, but they exist to get ahead, to move things forward. If you look at, there have been a lot of ads on TV about cancer research making a big leap recently. I mean, so you have to have people with the discipline and that out of the box, I hate that term, but the ability to synthesize from the conversation and try something new or work together with other folks to try to come to what that new thing is. And that's what creates innovation. So, you know, when you look at your role here, what your current role is with the company you work for, that's just what you kind of do, okay? It's not what you are, and it probably shouldn't be where you land, especially if you've got a few years left in there to work.
And it's interesting because when you look at, if you've looked at job descriptions and postings lately, they're getting so focused on finite skills. You know, 3 years of experience with this product and this tool, and must be able to write code in this language, rather than looking at what a person's, you know, looking to hire somebody who has the ability to fill the need of an organization. And it's, you know, it sounds like people are going to be hiring psychologists, and, you know, to look at machine learning and how people are interacting with the products. You need somebody who, you know, thinks like a scientist, but also is looking at the human technology relationship.
I think businesses are going to have to think differently about the people. I've always said to folks that have talked to me about, you know, being in a situation where they have to change roles, to take that time to think about themselves differently. You know, if you have a skill set that you've always applied here, what else might some of those things apply to? And then you have to figure out how to market it. But you also have to find people that are forward-thinking enough to know, hey, I can bring this in. I also will say that one of the things that we see behind people's names a lot these days are a few little initials. Well, and we've always respected PhD, right? Because they're advanced thinkers. Now, I'm not telling everybody to go get their PhD by any means, but I'm saying that those credentials help people understand the spectrum of your knowledge. And that opens the conversation to where you get the chance to introduce the other package you're trying to sell.
Your brand.
Yeah. So if you think about it, I had someone say to me many years ago, let's see if, because I was looking for a job, they said, and they were helping me. They said, let's see if I can find somebody who's willing to buy what you're selling. And you have to figure out how to package that in a meaningful way that ties to the line of folks out there that are buying, because they are buying. Even in a down economy, people change jobs.
One of the things that I would like to see, sort of along these lines, is I would like to see educational institutions start adding more variety into the software degree programs that they offer. I would love to see tests become a much more formal part of the curricula that's offered. I think most of the curriculums I've looked at and heard about from my colleagues are very, very short on things like working with other people, that whole communication piece of it. And in my experience, the biggest issues I've seen on projects with all the projects I've been on that have been a fail have almost always had a communication problem at the heart of it. And I think we need to really start expanding the curricula in order to support the needs of the future ability for people to effectively develop software.
Right, solutions.
And be able to blend, fit in to different companies. I mean, most people switch jobs every 2 or 3 years, especially when they're young. I mean, every time you walk into a new company, you're going to have to wear a slightly different hat and use a slightly different skill set. So teaching people how to manage in that environment, how to be effective in that environment. And I think Matt made some very good points about don't be complacent. You have to constantly be reinventing yourself. But technology industry, I've been in it for 25 years, and there's not a day goes by where there's not some new technology that I'm going, wow, when am I going to have time to learn that? And a lot of it's really exciting, and so you make the time. And I also wanted to say something about, you mentioned the word quality, and it's really hard to judge what quality is. I think that's a really interesting point. Maybe we should rename quality assurance to something else that is more sellable.
I've got a really key point to add this. We're kind of leveraging multiple people I work with perspective on this. One thing is you're talking about the relationships. First thing walks in the room, such as ourselves, you can take this with you back to your company, says, amongst your team, who owns quality? And what is quality and who owns it? Because they might say it's your team or it's you, or it's like, well, nobody does, or we collectively do, it's the team.
Yeah.
And that's one perspective. Another one, just echoing the same ideas, is I'm seeing a lot of that blend of positions where they weren't in quality, now they're going to product management or project management or some other avenue. And having those crossover skills, it kind of helps. Once you're now, think about it in that perspective, they're now crossing disciplines. We need more people to either cross our discipline or cross into others to help spread quality. So, my 2 cents.
Regarding the resume problem, or we're looking for people with 3 years of this or 2 years of that, there's clearly the other half of the equation is the businesses. Like, what they're looking for is they want to bring in somebody who can do some certain thing for them. And all they can do is use some metric. So they go and they say, well, we need some metrics, we need some numbers, something that we can compare, sort on. And then they get input and compare it, run it through the filter and see what sticks. So the other half of that is really going to be businesses being smarter about how to advertise for people without doing the bullet points of so many years of this. But it's harder. How do you describe exactly who you're looking for, the kinds of skills the person needs without doing the numbers? I think that's a huge problem.
Yeah. And a show of hands, how many people have an updated resume in the last 3 months? So because I see so few hands, I have recently had an experience with a resume writing company that I would suggest you just take a look at. I have no affiliation with them whatsoever, and they're overseas. But CD Now will rewrite your resume, and they're doing a very good job of running that resume through the online search filters that are being used against you right now. So check them out. Maybe it'll help you if you happen to be looking, but if you're older than 3 to 6 months on your resume, you need to really take a look at it and see if it's time to update it.
SEO for resume.
Yes, exactly.
So on the job description thing, that's more a breakdown of QA management in terms of what they're able to elucidate and what they're looking for, and the pressure from HR with all of the, there was a whole lot of federal oversight, and if you're subject to that, then you have to go through this. You have to specify 2 years of X, 3 years of Y, in order to meet those requirements. If you as a hiring manager have to go through that, that's fine. Do it, make HR happy, but really look beyond what that skill set or that number says. And it's like, oh, I have 5 years experience with X. Well, do you really know how to use it? That's what you as a hiring manager should be looking for.
Well, I think you also have an opportunity with the descriptor. Because it's there where you can say, I'm looking for abilities. I need these things because this is what I'm gonna have you do right now. But I'm looking for these abilities so I can keep you tomorrow.
Yeah. And there's basic qualifications and preferred qualifications, and I just don't want to get into all that.
Back?
Completely changing topics. You were talking about robotics earlier. What about non-physical robotics, which is, I think, becoming a much bigger thing where things like bots, things like, Alexa, which is not a physical robot.
Software bots.
But yeah, it's a software, but it's a robot. It is doing stuff for you. How do you test something that wide ranging?
Who wants to fill this one? Where's Robert?
Very carefully.
There's
He tested it.
somebody recently with this same bot, the university who teaches how to do AI actually built an AI, did not tell the students, and actually was one of the TAs. And actually, at the end of the class, they said, one of your TAs was an AI. Do you know which one was it? And everybody's like, no. So there already is research into this, but how they did it is they fed it the last 10 years worth of questions that were emailed to the professors. And so that's how they do machine learning, is essentially a data dump of all the possible things that essentially, I work in service virtualization, it's always a request response problem. Here's the question, here's the response going back as part of that bot. And that's kind of what I've been seeing is, essentially if you have enough raw data, you could feed it to this AI and kind of spot check it. But if it doesn't exist, now there's a problem.
I don't think the Turing test was the answer he's looking for.
Yeah.
So are you trying to test a software bot, build a software bot? What was the question?
I mean, so one of the things that I see us dealing with as an industry is the fact that they're just, that's the big buzzword for the next few years. Companies are going to be writing these things. How do we validate them? How do we make sure that they are? And I guess it's more a larger thing, but
I have the opposite problem. I have to protect against them.
right. Well, yeah, we have that also. But one of the things that we have is we're a big data company, so we have customers using our API and writing these things. How do we validate that theirs is working on our data set? Right, that's.
So why is that your responsibility? You're providing the API. Just to validate data.
Why is it our responsibility? That goes back to the relationship problem, because it's our responsibility when they call us, right? So how do we make sure?
Because your API is not working correctly, or they don't understand how to use it?
601.
There you go.
Well, how do you tell the difference?
Right.
And how do we tell the difference rapidly? How do I think about how to test that properly before it becomes a problem for my customer, and so thus becomes a problem for support, and so becomes a problem for my manager, and so becomes a problem for me.
So I think this may be one of those places too where like being able to start rolling things out to small sets of audiences is an important piece of it, and like, you know, roll it out to a few people, you have, and you're measuring the customer happiness with that change. You know, is it getting the results that you want? And you're either rolling it out broader or rolling it back. But I think it's actually an interesting flip on like how we think about quality and how much of it is upfront and how much of it is like learning to better, listen and react.
It's a different element of risk management. How much are you willing to forecast based on a limited sample set what the larger response is going to be, and then just keep iterating on that.
The idea I would leave you with is write more APIs, not more complicated APIs. Because the API should do one and only one thing, and it should do it well. And as long as it's not complicated, then
We have a really complex data model.
Well, but to your point there, you're talking about following data. It's a transaction.
Right.
There's some kind of a voiced expression of something that is interpreted, and a call is made and something's returned. I mean, this is why I said earlier, you have to understand how to follow the data. That is part of quality. It's also part of security. But that's why I'm saying, these are things, you've got to become familiar with those tools. By fabricating certain types of data in appropriate test markets, you can perform those tests to see if you can get some negative results. There's also, but you're right, the more data you've got, the more complex your model is. But that's where you get the opportunity to reinvent yourself. Because it's not about when your customer calls and they put in X and thought they were going to get Y and they got ALM. You really have to figure out, how do we make sure that when they put in X, they do get Y? And it's predictable with a certain level of assurance. And then you need to sell that.
Yeah, that's the problem I'm running into.
Well, it's a value proposition. And I think, I keep going back to this, but you have to convince people that if you sell a product that is robust enough that 90% of the time it gives the accurate result or whatever, people pay for that. That's value. So your organization will say, I can get behind that. I'll fund that. It could be a series of complex algorithms. It could, and maybe if that's not your area of expertise, maybe designing just the concept of what needs to happen, and then you partner with others to get this together. But that's the kind of think tank that we need to develop. That is quality. That is security, and that is value.
I think we are at time. I think that's a good place to hold.
There's still time
I've
to.
got one really brief comment, if I can, which is what I think the future holds. Well, I think it's so bright, we're going to have to wear shades.